A soul trapped in purgatory for 700 years for a single sin, 700 years not for murder, not for adultery, not for apostasy, blasphemy, or any of the grave sins we usually associate with severe punishment. 7 centuries for one offense, a sin so ordinary that countless people commit it every day without even stopping to think about it. A behavior so common, so accepted, and so deeply woven into everyday life that calling it a serious sin might almost sound unreasonable. And yet, according to the vision described by Bridget of Sweden, there stood a soul in the place of purification, suffering for centuries and still awaiting release. The punishment had continued for generation after generation because of something he had repeatedly done without ever believing it truly mattered. When Bridget asked why the punishment was so severe, the answer she received challenged everything she thought she understood about divine justice. It revealed a lesson far deeper than the punishment itself, and one that should make every person examine their own daily choices with greater seriousness. It was not about the size of the sin. It was about something else entirely, something that multiplies even small sins into enormous debts, something that most souls never consider until they stand before the judgment seat and discover too late what they have accumulated. What Bridget learned in that vision has been recorded for 600 years. Priests know about it, theologians have studied it, but almost no one teaches it to ordinary believers anymore, perhaps because it is too frightening, perhaps because it implicates too many of us. Today, you will learn what Bridget saw. You will understand why some souls spend centuries in purgatory while others pass through quickly. You will discover the hidden factor that determines the length of purification and what you can do right now while you are still alive to avoid the fate of the man who suffered for 700 years. But first, you need to understand who Bridget was and why her testimony about purgatory carries such weight. Bridget of Sweden was not a knave peasant prone to superstition. She was a noble woman, educated, politically connected, married for 28 years to a noblewoman with whom she raised 8 children. One of those children, Catherine, would herself become a canonized saint. After her husband's death in 1344, Bridget's mystical experiences intensified dramatically. Christ and the Virgin Mary appeared to her regularly, showing her visions of heaven, hell, and purgatory. She witnessed judgments of individual souls. She saw the state of the church and received prophecies about its future. The church took her seriously. Her revelations were examined by multiple theological commissions. The Council of Basel reviewed them. The Council of Constance studied them. Cardinals, bishops, and popes sought her counsel. In 1391, she was canonized as a saint. In 1999, Pope John Paul Tullier named her one of the 6 patron saints of Europe. Her writings on purgatory are particularly detailed. Unlike many mystics who received vague impressions, Bridget was shown specific souls, specific sins, specific durations, and specific reasons. She asked questions and received answers. She recorded everything with the precision of a witness giving legal testimony. When Bridget speaks about what she saw in purgatory, we are dealing with ecclesiastically approved revelation from one of the most credible seers in Christian history. And what she saw there should make every soul pause and examine their life. Before we enter Bridget's vision, we must understand what purgatory actually is. Many people, even many Catholics, have confused or incomplete ideas about this doctrine. Purgatory is not a second chance. It is not a place where souls who rejected God get another opportunity to accept Him. Those souls go elsewhere and their fate is sealed. Purgatory is for those who died in God's grace, who genuinely loved God, who repented of their mortal sins, who would, before I continue the story, allow me a brief moment. If this reflection has spoken to your heart so far, I invite you only if you feel called to help this work reach someone who may need it. Scripture says, "Let your light shine before others that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." Matthew 5:16. When you subscribe, leave a comment, or share this video, you help this light travel a little farther into the world, a quiet act of charity. Thank you. Amen. I've chosen heaven. If given the choice, these souls are saved. Their eternal destination is certain. They will reach heaven, but they are not yet ready for heaven. Think of it this way. Heaven is perfect union with God. It is the direct experience of infinite love, infinite beauty, infinite truth. To enter that presence, a soul must be pure, not because God is arbitrary, but because impurity cannot tolerate that much holiness. It would be agony, not bliss. Most of us die with attachments still clinging to our souls, sinful habits we never fully conquered, selfishness we never completely rooted out, debts we never fully paid for, sins that were forgiven but not entirely atoned for. Purgatory is where these remaining impurities are burned away, not as punishment in the strict sense, not as retribution, but as purification. The way fire purifies gold by burning away the dross. The souls in purgatory want this purification. They understand its necessity. They would not want to enter heaven still stained, still attached, still carrying the residue of their earthly failures. The burning is painful, but it is healing pain, surgical pain, the pain of becoming who they were always meant to be. But here is what Bridget discovered. The duration of that burning varies enormously from soul to soul. Some pass through quickly, others remain for what would be centuries in earthly time. And the difference is not always what you would expect. The vision began in darkness. Bridget found herself standing at the edge of a vast space filled with souls in various states of purification. Some were surrounded by fire. Others were immersed in water so cold it burned like fire. Others hung suspended in darkness, isolated, unable to see or hear anything except their own thoughts. But all of them shared one thing. They were suffering, and they accepted their suffering because they understood it was necessary. Christ appeared beside Bridget. His face showed something she had rarely seen in her visions of judgment. Not anger, not sorrow, but something like patient explanation. He had brought her here to learn something important. Watch, he said, and understand. He directed her attention to a particular soul, a man who appeared to be in his middle years, though age has little meaning in that place. The man was surrounded by a fire that seemed to penetrate not just his body, but his very essence. His face showed pain, but also acceptance. He did not rage against his suffering. He endured it. This soul has been here for 700 years, Christ said. Bridget was shocked. 7 centuries, longer than most nations lasted, longer than entire civilizations. She had known that purgatory could be lengthy, but this exceeded anything she had imagined. What did he do? She asked. What sin could possibly require such extended purification? Christ's answer was not what she expected. His sin was common, so common that most people do not even recognize it as sin. He paused. He complained. Bridget did not understand, complained. Lord, he was ungrateful. Throughout his life, he received blessing after blessing from my hand, health, family, sufficient food, meaningful work, the faith itself. And instead of giving thanks, he complained. The weather was too hot or too cold. The food was not to his liking. His work was tedious. His family was imperfect. His neighbors were annoying. His priests were boring. Every day from morning until night, he found something to complain about. He poisoned his own experience of life with constant dissatisfaction. And worse, he poisoned others. His complaint spreads discontent to everyone around him. His wife became bitter because his attitude infected her. His children learned ingratitude by watching him. His neighbors avoided him because his negativity was exhausting. Christ's voice grew heavy. He never thanked me. Not once in his entire life did he offer genuine, heartfelt gratitude for what he had been given. He received my gifts and immediately began cataloging their deficiencies. Bridget struggled to comprehend. But Lord, complaining, is that truly so serious? Is it not just a small fault, a minor imperfection? Christ turned to face her directly. Gasp, let me show you what complaining truly is. The space around them shifted. Bridget found herself witnessing scenes from the man's clear throat life, but not as he had experienced them. She saw them as heaven saw them. She watched a morning in the man's household. His wife had prepared breakfast, simple food, but nourishing. She had risen early to make it. She had worked with hands that were calloused from years of service to this family. The man sat down, looked at the food, and frowned. This again. Can we not have something different for once? Bridget watched his wife's face, the small light of hope. Maybe today he would appreciate her effort extinguished. Her shoulders slumped slightly. She said nothing. What was there to say? She had heard this complaint 1,000 times before. But Bridget saw something else. She saw the angels watching this scene. She saw them recording not just the words, but the effect of the words. She saw a small wound open in the wife's heart, one of countless wounds this man had inflicted with his tongue. Christ spoke, "Every complaint is a rejection of my providence." When he complained about the food, he was saying that what I had provided was not good enough. When he complained about the weather, he was criticizing my creation. When he complained about his family, he was rejecting the souls I had placed in his life for his good and theirs. But the deeper sin was what his complaints did to others. He did not suffer alone. He spread his suffering. His wife, who might have found joy in her work, learned to dread it because nothing she did was ever good enough. His children, who might have grown up grateful, learned instead to see deficiency everywhere they looked. He was a carrier of spiritual disease, and the disease spread through everyone he contacted. The scenes continued. Bridget watched the man at his work complaining about customers, complaining about suppliers, complaining about the difficulty of honest labor. She watched him at church complaining about the length of the mass gasp, the quality of the sermon, the behavior of other parishioners, sighs and gasps. She watched him with neighbors spreading discontent like a farmer spreads seed, and she watched the cumulative effect, a wife whose joy slowly died over decades. Children who grew up believing that life was essentially disappointing, a community subtly poisoned by one man's relentless negativity. Do you understand now? Christ asked. It was not one complaint that brought him here. It was thousands upon thousands of complaints accumulating over a lifetime, each one small in itself. Together they formed a mountain, and each one affected others. Each one caused damage that spread beyond his own soul. The wife he discouraged, the children he trained in bitterness, the neighbors he infected with dissatisfaction. He must pay not only for his own sin, but for all the effects of his sin in others. This is why 700 years, not because I am harsh, but because the debt is genuinely that large. He spent 60 years poisoning everyone around him. The poison continues to work even now in descendants who learned ingratitude from ancestors who learned it from him. Until all of that is burned away, not just from his soul, but from the chain of consequences he created, his purification continues. Bridget was shaken. She had never considered complaining to be serious. She herself complained sometimes about the weather, about difficulties in her work, about the behavior of church officials she dealt with. Was she accumulating a similar debt? As if reading her thoughts, Christ continued, "Not all complaints are equal. There is a difference between expressing genuine hardship and wallowing in ingratitude. There is a difference between acknowledging difficulty and refusing to see blessing. This man had no genuine hardship. His life was comfortable compared to most. But even those with genuine suffering can choose gratitude or bitterness. The martyrs praised me from their crosses. This man complained from his warm home with food on his table. The question is always this: what does the heart focus on? The gifts received or the gifts withheld? The blessings present or the blessings absent? A grateful heart can find joy in prison. An ungrateful heart can find misery in paradise. Christ gestured toward other souls in the vast space of purification. Let me snorts you more. Let me show you what determines how long a soul remains here. The next soul Bridget was shown had been in purgatory for only 3 days. This surprised her even more than the 700 years. 3 days seemed impossibly short for any purification. What kind of soul could be so clean as to need only 3 days of burning? The soul was a woman, a peasant from her simple appearance. She had clearly lived a hard life. Her face showed the marks of suffering, even in this spiritual state. This woman was poor, Christ explained. She worked hard every day of her life. She buried 3 of her 6 children before they reached adulthood. Her husband was often ill and could not work, so she labored for the whole family. She had every reason to complain, every reason to be bitter, every reason to shake her fist at heaven and demand to know why her life was so hard. But she did not complain. Every morning she thanked me for another day of life. Every evening she thanked me for the food on her table, however meager. When her children died, she wept, but she also said, "The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." She transformed her suffering into prayer. She offered her hardships for the souls in purgatory, for the conversion of sinners, for the needs of the church. Every pain became an offering. Every difficulty became a gift. Christ's voice softened. Her purification is brief because there is so little to purify. She lived a life of gratitude and offering. What remains is only the smallest residue of human imperfection. 3 days, and she will see my face. Bridge understood the contrast. 2 lives, one comfortable and complaining, one difficult and grateful. The comfortable man would suffer for 700 years. The suffering woman would be purified in 3 days. It is not the external circumstances that matter. Christ confirmed it is the interior response. Gratitude transforms suffering into gold. Complaint transforms blessing into lead. Christ showed Bridget many more souls during this vision. Each one taught her something about what lengthens or shortens the time in purgatory. She saw a wealthy man who had given generously to charity throughout his life, but who had given for recognition, not for love. He had wanted his name on buildings, his generosity praised at banquets, his reputation as a philanthropist secured. The money he gave was genuinely helpful to the poor. But his motive poisoned the gift. He was being purified not of greed, but of vanity. His time would be long because vanity had penetrated every area of his life. She saw a woman who had been harsh with her tongue, not malicious. Exactly. She never lied, never gossiped, never spoke behind people's backs, but she was blunt to the point of cruelty. She told people their faults without gentleness. She corrected without compassion. She was right in what she said, but wrong in how she said it. She had wounded countless souls with truth delivered without love. Her purification was teaching her what her words had felt like to others. She saw a priest who had performed his duties faithfully, but without fervor. He had said Mass correctly. He had heard confessions by the book. He had preached sound doctrine, but he had done it all mechanically without love, without entering into the mystery. He had handled sacred things with mundane hands. His purification was intense because he had received so much grace and responded with so little fire. She saw a mother who had loved her children but loved them wrongly, possessively, controllingly, making them extensions of herself rather than souls with their own destinies. Her love was real but disordered. In purgatory, she was learning to release, to let her children belong to God rather than to her. This was one of the more painful purifications Bridget witnessed because it required the burning away of something that felt like virtue, but was actually a subtle form of selfishness. And she saw a man who had spent his life in what appeared to be minor sin. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would shock anyone. He had been lazy, not completely idle, but never fully engaged. He had done the minimum at work, the minimum at home, the minimum in his spiritual life. He had coasted through 60 years, never committing terrible evil, but never rising to any good either. His purification was teaching him what effort felt like, what engagement demanded, what it meant to fully show up for life instead of always holding back. This was painful in a different way than fire. It was the pain of cramped muscles forced to stretch, of atrophied capacities forced to develop. Lord Bridget asked, after witnessing all of this, what determines the length of purification? Is there a principle I can understand? Christ answered her carefully. There are several factors. Let me explain them so you can teach others. First, the depth of attachment. A sin committed once in weakness is different from a sin committed repeatedly until it becomes habit. Habit creates grooves in the soul. Those grooves must be smoothed out. The deeper the groove, the longer the smoothing takes. Second, the effect on others. Sins that harm only the sinner are purified more quickly than sins that harm others. And sins that harm many others, or that start chains of harm extending through generations, require the longest purification. The complaining man harmed everyone he met. The poison he spread is still spreading. He cannot be fully purified until that poison is accounted for. Third, the degree of knowledge. A sin committed in ignorance is different from a sin committed with full knowledge of its evil. The more clearly you see that something is wrong, the more serious it is to choose it anyway. This is why priests and religious often face longer purifications than Lee. They knew more, so their failures are weighted more heavily. Fourth, the failure to repent and repair. A sin that is confessed, repented, and repaired as much as possible while still on earth requires less purification than a sin that is ignored or minimized. The man who complained could have changed at any point in his life. He could have recognized his fault, repented, begun practicing gratitude. He did not. He carried his sin unrepented to the grave. This multiplied what would have been a brief purification into centuries. Fifth, the prayers of the living. Souls in purgatory cannot help themselves. They can only wait and suffer, but the living can help them. Masses offered for them, prayers said for them, indulgences applied to them. All of these shorten their time. The souls who have people praying for them are released sooner than souls who are forgotten. Christ paused. This last point is important. Many souls suffer far longer than necessary because no one remembers them. Their families stop praying after a few years. Their names are forgotten. They wait in the fire with no help coming. This is why the church teaches the faithful to pray for the dead, not just for your own dead, but for all the souls in purgatory, especially those who have no one else to pray for them. This is one of the greatest acts of charity possible, to relieve suffering that the sufferers cannot relieve themselves. Bridget had one more question, the most important question for anyone still living. Lord, how can we avoid long purification? What can we do now while we still have time? Christ's answer was both simple and demanding. First, practice gratitude every day. Thank me for what you have received, not as a formula, but genuinely. Look at your life and see the gifts. This one practiced faithfully followed would empty purgatory of half its souls. Second, repair what you can. If you have harmed others, seek their forgiveness. If you have damaged relationships, heal them. If you owe debts, financial, emotional, spiritual, pay them while you can. Every debt paid on earth is a debt that need not be paid in purgatory. Third, accept your sufferings. Every pain you experience can be transformed into purgatorial fire. Experience now freely accepted rather than later imposed by necessity. The saints understood this. They welcomed difficulty because they knew it was purifying them in advance. Fourth, pray for the dead. What you give will be given to you. Those who remember the suffering souls will be remembered when they themselves are suffering. The mercy you show will be shown to you. Fifth, receive the sacraments. Confession forgives sins, but also remits some of the punishment due to them. The Eucharist unites you to my sacrifice and applies its merits to your soul. The indulgences the Church offers can remove punishment entirely if received with proper disposition. None of this is complicated. All of it is available to anyone who wants it. The souls suffering in purgatory for centuries would give anything to return to earth for one day and practice what I have just told you. You have that day. You have many days. The question is whether you will use them. But before it ended entirely, Christ showed Bridget one final thing. He showed her the moment of release. A soul whose purification was complete, finally ready to enter heaven. The fire simply stopped. The darkness lifted, and the soul looked up to see light. Not the harsh light of exposure and judgment, but warm light, welcoming light, the light of home. Angels came to escort the soul upward, and on the soul's face, Bridget saw something she would never forget. Joy so profound it erased all memory of suffering. The centuries of burning gone in an instant as if they had never been. Only the purity remained, only the readiness for God. This is what awaits every soul who endures. Christ said, no matter how long the purification, it ends. And when it ends, the soul enters joy that makes the suffering seem like nothing. They would all tell you, if they could, that it was worth it. Every moment was worth it. But they would also tell you this: do what you can now. Accept the smaller fire of earthly penance rather than the greater fire of purgatory. Practice gratitude rather than complaint. Repair your sins rather than carry them into death. Pray for the dead rather than ignore them. What you do now matters eternally. The time you save yourself may be measured in centuries. She began keeping a mental account of every complaint that rose to her lips and suppressing most of them. She practiced gratitude with new intensity, thanking God not just for obvious blessings, but for difficulties that were purifying her in advance. She prayed constantly for the souls in purgatory, especially those who had no one else to pray for them. She had seen their suffering. She had seen how the prayers of the living brought relief. She could not forget. And she recorded everything she had witnessed so that others could learn from it, so that 600 years later you could hear what she heard and see what she saw. The man in purgatory for 700 years is still there, or perhaps by now his purification is complete. Bridget did not know, and we cannot know. Time moves differently in that place. But his story remains as a warning. Mere complaining, cost him 7 centuries of suffering. It is a habit so common that we hardly recognize it anymore. A behavior so normalized that we rarely stop to consider whether it could be sinful. Yet day by day, year after year, these small choices can accumulate like tiny coins, slowly becoming an enormous debt. Consider your own life. How often do you complain about the weather, the traffic, your work, your family, or the condition of the world? How often do you focus on everything that is wrong while overlooking what is still good? And how often does your dissatisfaction spread to the people around you, affecting their mood and feeding the same negativity? According to Bridget's vision, this was not something to take lightly. But there is an important difference between you and the soul she witnessed. You are still alive. Your story is not finished. You still have the opportunity to change your habits, your words, and the direction of your life. So don't wait for tomorrow. Begin today, even with your very next sentence. Instead of complaining, choose gratitude. Instead of constant criticism, choose appreciation. Instead of focusing only on what is missing, pause and recognize what you have. Small changes in your words can become profound changes in the way you live.